David, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much for jumping on. Mate, can you just tell everyone just about what you do and your martial arts background? So what actually drew you into martial arts?
I've been doing martial arts almost 30 years now. We're closing in on that gap. So since I was 5, I started out traditional karate, switched over to Tae Kwon Do. I did Tae Kwon Do for about 22 years or so. I did Hapkido for a while. I wrestled a little bit as a kid and then stopped wrestling. When I got to college, I picked up boxing and then actually joined a wrestling club that was at school. So I was kind of boxing and wrestling at the same time throughout college, as well as doing Muay Thai. When I graduated college, I decided to take up Jiu Jitsu just because there wasn't anything near me at school at the time, and I didn't want to come home, do jiu-jitsu, go back to school, come home, train, go back to school. So I pretty much just stuck to wrestling training, MMA training, everything but jiu-jitsu. Once I graduated, I started jiu-jitsu, and that's been like my primary ever since. So I hold a black belt in jiu-jitsu, still striking. So I teach it on a regular basis, at least at my spot. We teach MMA classes, striking, so it could be boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. We'll throw in some wrestling, some judo here and there, and then self-defense.
Yeah, and what's really impressive about you, man, is your forte is specifically self-defense. And
Yes.
I think that the reason why I think a lot of people gravitate to your content is because jiu-jitsu is one of the only martial arts on the planet that was purely designed for self-defense. And some of the things that you work in as well, mate, like you work with women's self-defense programs and things like that. Specifically, what are some of the challenges that you faced in your martial arts journey, specifically self-defense?
In what sense? Of like,
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of fuckery that goes on in the martial arts community.
yeah.
You know, what does work, what doesn't work, and I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to get into jiu-jitsu a little bit later because I want to talk to you a bit more about that. But what are some of the challenges that you've
I'd say
sort of
from like
faced?
from the self defense perspective, and I even kind of fell into this a little bit. Is you have to kind of be open minded with the training. And when I was doing the Hapkido program that we did, it's Combat Hapkido. You're learning wrist locks and arm bars and all this stuff. You're learning weapon defense. And then even our Tae Kwon Do was very street-oriented self-defense. We used to be a point, when I joined as a kid, it was a point-based system. And then over time, our instructor kind of changed it to strictly kind of combatives. But the older and older I got, and I started training with boxing, that was like one of my first big eye-openers, is a lot of the people that we were doing self-defense training with had never been punched in the face before. And I had been in some scraps as a kid and stuff, but when I started boxing and started taking some real hits, I was like, yeah, this stuff that we're learning is not really going to kind of work too well when someone's actually trying to hurt you. And then I added in, the jiu-jitsu aspect. I'm like, man, we have no sense of what to do on the ground. And so that's where I kind of started taking a different approach to self-defense, and those were the main reasons I kind of stopped training in Tae Kwon Do and Hapkido, just for the fact of like, well, we need to kind of branch out, and I need to just go be a student again and just go see what else is out there. And that's when I started training a little bit more heavily with the combat sports, just because that's the best way to kind of get real life resistance. Somebody is actually trying to break something or hurt you in a still safe environment, and then you can take those concepts and apply it to self-defense, because there are differences. It's not huge, but it's a different headspace and a different mindset that you need to be in, and so that's where we kind of started eliminating a lot of the hearsay of, well, this would work, this wouldn't work. It's like, well, you try this on somebody smaller or bigger, you can do it, but you're going to see how it has to different. I think that's one thing that I'll probably still get often is, well, if I'm a smaller person, like, there's no way it's going to work. I'm like, no, it can, but you got to work 10 times harder than a bigger person. So like, I'm like, that's why I always tell people, I'm like, if you are that doubtful, I'm like, go take a jiu-jitsu class, go train for a few months and see what does work, what doesn't work, and then how stuff is possible. But you just got to know the right technique, and if anything, you got to learn how to stay calm. So that's probably like the biggest thing that we kind of come across is the disconnect of people that train self-defense, but they don't train combat sports.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, David, like I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well. And there was a video that was posted online a video of Andrew Tate, and he got a lot of backlash from the BJJ community. He said BJJ is fucking useless in a street fight. And I looked at that video and I thought to myself, there's pros and cons with anything. So yes, it's a death wish to go to the ground against multiple attackers, but what if you're taken to the ground against your will?
Right.
Secondly, what if you work in law enforcement, mate? What do you have to detain or arrest a suspect?
Right.
You know, you're going to have to utilize grappling. Another situation as well is you need to learn the laws. You have to understand the laws for self-defense because, I mean, do you really want to be doing a 50-move kata on someone's head when you can just control and restrain them? So what are some of the challenges in that aspect that you sort of talked about with your students?
I think, and I've even had conversations with this with a lot of guys that are in the combatives realm of self-defense, and the beauty of the internet is you find these guys and you're able to go out, train with them, see if they're the real deal, and you know, not only do they have extensive real life experiences, but they're also black belts in jiu-jitsu. And so the beauty is, like, when we talk with them, our biggest complaint with jiu-jitsu and self-defense are these high-level black belt competitors that are then teaching self-defense.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're a great competitor. This has nothing to do with self-defense. And I always tell people, if you look at it as a very big picture, everything that you need for self-defense from jiu-jitsu, you'll learn in your first year. You're not going to be good at it, but you will be exposed to it in your first year. Everything past that is a sport. You don't, like, the stuff that I'm learning now, black belt, you know, leg locks and all this stuff, like, I'm not going to use any of that in the street. If I can get on top, if I can stay on top, and if I can hold you down against your will, essentially, if we're talking self-defense, and without causing any harm, then I've done the job. You know, when I see videos of instructors and high-level instructors that are like, we're going to teach arm bars on the ground for women for self-defense, and we're going to teach them triangle chokes, and it's like, your goal should be trying to get out, get on top, use your framework to make space. Like, the jiu-jitsu aspect for self-defense is not that complicated. It's the fundamentals just done extremely well. And yeah, if we're talking, like, if I'm a jiu-jitsu guy and I get into a street fight and it ends up on the ground, then you should absolutely be in control the entire time. But as you said, that doesn't mean that I'm breaking stuff. If I and I've done some videos on the past where, like, sure, I see videos of guys that get onto a bad dude's back and they choke him out in the street. Awesome. But you're just lucky that somebody else wasn't there, or you're lucky that they didn't have a weapon in their hand or something. And so we've even done videos of, like, oh, cool, you end up on somebody's back on the ground. Well, here's how you quickly get out from the back and you get on top. But you're still in control the whole time, because at the end of the day, like, I want to be able to pop back up to my feet if I need to, or if all of a sudden I see you running in to help out your buddy, I should be able to get up and get back off immediately, rather than like, oh shit, now I'm stuck underneath this guy and now somebody else is coming in to kick my face in. It's not a good spot for me to be. So I think that's the biggest disconnect that people have that only train jiu-jitsu but don't truly train, or they're like, oh, I've been doing fighting enough, like, I could teach self-defense. And it's like, it's a different realm. And I encourage people to go out and train with guys that have been in the dirt, guys that have developed high-level programs with weapon defense or multiple attackers or something, where you're just kind of going to get a little bit of a reality check of, oh, so this is what it looks like. And just because I know jiu-jitsu, I still need to know how to strike. Because most of the encounters I've been in when we do, like, at least training, if I have decent enough striking, I can keep you from tying up with me. And then if you do tie up with me, well, then there goes my jiu-jitsu, and that kicks in play. But again, I'm doing everything in my power to stay on my feet. You know, I'm not just gonna comfortably, like, oh, well, I guess we're going to the ground. Then it's like, no, if I can stay on my feet, that's what I'm gonna do. And so I there's a lot of elements. So I think that's the only thing that really kind of irks me with jiu-jitsu guys teaching self-defense. Again, and I respect anyone that's out there teaching, but I'm like, you have to know where the line is between, like, what's sport, what's self-defense, and it's very simple.
And we know that trained martial artists, especially more so, is very important to walk away from any street altercation if you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's important. There was a video that went viral. There was a gentleman that was, and I think you posted this video as well. I posted it on my channel too. But there was an individual that teaches at Eric Paulson's gym, and he was talking about verbal jiu-jitsu.
Oh,
yes, yeah. He was talking about a story about a guy that got into a bar fight, and he hit this guy. The guy goes down, hits his head on the pavement, pavement and
dies.
dies. Yeah. And these are some of the consequences that people have to think about. And you should always avoid any sort of situation where you have to, obviously defend yourself if you need to. But, what are some of the things that you talk about and educate with your students with regards to the laws?
I think, well, to tie into that, I think that's another reason that I have a lot of issues with jiu-jitsu competitors or just high-level jiu-jitsu athletes teaching self-defense is a lot of them, like, if they were to put themselves in a situation, or even like if I post a video and you'd see in the comments like, oh, I would fuck this dude up, I'm like, yeah, I would get the hell out of there. Like, there's no need for me, like, I got nothing to prove. And I think that's the problem with combat athletes is they're like, yeah, I'm a tough dude and I can fight, which is great. Like, that's your confidence. And honestly, any dude that's a good fighter, people should be able to see that in you and just know, like, yeah, I'm not going to mess with this guy. But that doesn't mean that you need to stir shit up just to prove a point that you can fight. Yes. Like, that's not our goal. So I had one kid, a student of mine, who had been training with me and one other instructor on us for a little bit, and then all of a sudden he did like one jiu-jitsu match, took some time off, and then because he wasn't actively training for a fight, turned into 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, a year, and just started kind of running with the wrong crowd. And then I finally talked with his uncle, because I taught the uncle, his son trains with me as well, and so I was talking, I was like, yo, where's this dude at? I haven't seen him in a minute. He's like, oh, he's kind of running with the wrong crowd. And then I get a phone call and they're like, hey, he wants to come back and train. Is that cool? I said, yeah, like, bring him in. They're like, well, we need to let you know he got into a school fight the other day. And they're like, he beat the shit out of a kid for no reason. Just beat the piss out of the kid. I said, okay. They're like, yep, he's expelled right now. He's facing legal action because of it and stuff. I said, well, what was the issues? And he's like, the kid said the wrong, called him a name or something, and he just beat the shit out of the kid. Running with the wrong crowd. And so he's still kind of dealing with some of those issues, but I brought him in and we definitely kind of politely kind of pieced him up in sparring a little bit. The first day that he came back, I had kind of informed some of the higher level guys, and then at the end of it, we kind of sat down and had a conversation. I said, look, I was like, you're my student. I said, I will not tolerate people out there starting shit. Yeah. I said, and neither will anyone else. I'm like, no one that you train with is going to tolerate that. But I said, I want you to realize something. I said, you just got pieced up by 4 or 5 dudes that know how to fight with gloves on. I said, if you want, we can take our gloves off and we can go again. And you can see how tough you are when you go against somebody that's bigger than you, stronger than you, better than you. I said, out there on the street, I said, you have no idea what the other dudes are capable of. So I'm like, just because someone says the wrong thing to you or looks at you the wrong way, I said, you're going to go try and prove a point. I said, what if the kid had a weapon? Yes. I said, what if you just got lucky and pulled something and you didn't see it because you're just seeing red? And so we had a long talk about that, but we pretty much put him in the ringer, and again, safe environment. And at the end of it, he's like, yeah, I kind of get it. And he's definitely kind of gone back on the right path. And he even admitted, he's a 15-year-old kid. He's like, I was lost. I didn't know, not the best home life, whatever. He's like, I didn't really kind of know what I was doing. And, but that was our way of kind of teaching it. And then that's been used as like an example for everyone else that knew about it, of like, this is the stupidity of doing this stuff. And I've had friends who have lost their husbands because they got into a bar fight, and like the wife was like, "Yep, I'm going home for the night," and her it's a family friend of ours, but her husband stayed out. I don't know the reason for the fight starting, but same situation. He got hit in the head, fell, cracked his head open, and that was the end of it.
It's so sad when you hear about something like that.
But it's so stupid. It's so easy to just, dude, I'm so sorry, Matt. Let me buy you a drink. I didn't mean to piss you off. And so one of the best things that we've done is when, and I've incorporated this into my programs, is when we're teaching, or when I've taken a lot of self-defense seminars from certain individuals, they have a whole program where you'll spend 4 hours just learning how to talk out of situations. Yeah. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. And that's where the ego comes in.
100% agree with you.
So like when I run self-defense, and it's like, we may run like a 2.5-hour course and 40 minutes of it is like a modified version. People are like, well, when are we going to start hitting stuff? I was like, figure this out first. Everyone always wants to learn self-defense of like the worst case scenario. I'm like, this is the most important part of any self-defense, is just not getting to that scenario to begin with. And it starts with this conversation of just, how do I talk myself out? How do I avoid those fights at all costs? Like, my training is for shit hits the fan, nothing works, I get caught off guard, somebody just wants to push my buttons and really test everything. I said, yeah, then I'm going to be forced to get hands-on. But like, that is all a last resort.
Yeah.
And then we're not even talking about, anything I'm carrying. Like, that's even past that. So, yeah, there's levels to it. And I think that verbal judo, I think is what they called in the video.
Yes.
Is probably one of the most important aspects of self-defense in general. And it sucks. Like, yeah, like I've got years of training. Like, would I love to be like, dude, let's fucking test it. Like, come on, let's go. Like, everyone deep down is like, yeah, let me just prove to this dude.
Yeah.
But in the reality, it's like, it's not worth it.
And I think too, man, because you and I have been training in martial arts for a long time, and I think that humility is there. The fact that you're capable of inflicting violence if you need to, but then also you understand what it's like to walk away and have that humility. What do you think a lot of martial arts schools go wrong, mate? Like with regards to education and understanding the laws, but also keeping their students safe. But what do you think schools need to do more of?
I think the instructors need to train. I think that's a big gap themselves, is the instructors need to go out and expose themselves and kind of find where their weak points are so that they can come back and be like, you know what? I was wrong on this, or here's what I learned from this. Here's what I figured out. I took an instructor's course recently on how to build a fight team with striking. Just because I've gotten a lot more guys coming in that are wanting to do MMA fights and stuff. And I said, you know what? I said, this is just something, like, I've been striking my whole life. I don't hyper focus on it as much as I do with like grappling. I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll go out, and any opportunity I can to go learn something, I'm like, these are some really nice drills. And I even came back like the following week and I said, look, I'm going to apologize to all of you. I said, I know we've kind of been slacking on these areas. Like, that's on me. And so we started doing drills, and everyone's like, yeah, we needed that. And everyone always just wants to like, all right, let's hit some pads and let's spar. And I kind of just let that happen. And so like breaking it back down to the basics across everything was good. But I think that's where I see a lot of instructors that don't want to step out of that comfort zone and get humbled in a sense.
Yeah.
Especially if you're teaching self-defense. Like I was always getting asked questions about knife defense, gun defense. And I said, you know what? I was like, I need to hyper focus on this stuff for a little bit. So I spent like 2-3 years of only training with blades, and I was taking every seminar that I could in the country of like, oh, this dude teaches a knife seminar, I'm gonna go to. Oh, this guy teaches one, I'm gonna go to. And they're, a day long, 2 days long, 3 days long. And I was like, I didn't care. I was like, I'm going to, and I just hyper focused on it. And as a result, not only did I learn more with that stuff, but like my knowledge of everything else has kind of opened up even more. But then it teaches you stuff too, because then I also learned, like one of the drills that we did in one of the classes was you start off in a verbal altercation. I have a firearm or a training firearm, and I just have to kind of react to the situation. And if I feel the need to draw my firearm, I have to. And I have to learn how to deploy properly. But what it teaches you is that most situations, I don't have to resort to this. But one thing I learned is if you're confident in your ability to fight, I don't need to resort to this. And the guy in the drill got super hands-on with me. And for like a good minute and change, I was holding my own, just striking him and just hitting him and keeping him at bay with hits. And then I was like, you know what? I want to just go for it just because that's part of the drill. Let me just see what it's like if I were to draw it. And so I just kind of went out, but even afterwards when we broke it down, I even told the instructor, I was like, look, I'll be honest. I was like, I did not feel the need to have to draw this at any point during that encounter because I was comfortable fighting. But because I've taken those seminars and I've learned from it, I can take that back to the students and make them better. But I think my biggest issue is if I see instructors not actively training themselves. And the same goes with jiu-jitsu. If I never see the jiu-jitsu coach training, if I never see them jumping in for rounds, if I never see them cross-training, it's like, where are you getting all your information from? I mean, we've been opening up the gym here lately, so I haven't really had a chance to jump into other schools like I normally do, but I would normally train 1-2 days a week at another gym and just go in and just take a class or go to an open mat or something where it's people I'm not used to and just go train with them. Let alone I'm jumping in obviously with my students every day. But I think instructors have to actively train and learn, no matter what discipline you are. Boxing, wrestling, anything. You have to actively train, unless you have some form of physically handicapped, but you got to do it.
And you obviously practice what you preach, mate. I've seen you're good friends with Eli Knight, who I'm hoping to get on the podcast as well.
And he's actually coming out here December.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he's
excellent.
gonna come out and
Yeah.
do a seminar here with us in December. He's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy. I've been chatting to him on Facebook actually, so yeah, hoping to get him on the podcast as well. But it's interesting. He did a DVD a long time ago, I think, called The Bladed Grappler, and he was sort of showcasing some knife defense. And for those people that don't understand, like I've actually pressure tested with knives myself. And I just couldn't believe how taxing and tiring it actually is. When someone's actually trying to stab you for real,
it's
you
a
are
different
fucked.
mentality. It's a different mentality. And I think that's what startles people is like, I could do a hard round.
Yeah.
I could push a hard. 30 seconds of fighting over a weapon where somebody's trying to kill you, it's a different. And if you have it in like, and I don't just mean like, oh, you're just playing around with your buddy and you're having fun. I mean, like if it's a drill, like if you're doing like live positional sparring and then they're like, oh, by the way, he's got a knife, you're like, oh damn.
Yeah.
And then it just like, and I do it with I've got a lot of cops that train with us, and I'll ask them randomly like, hey, you want to do a round, or do you want to do a round where I'm gonna try and hold you down and you got to get control? Like, do you want to do a cop round? And we'll call it like cop rounds, where it's like, it's not jujitsu, it's I'm gonna try and just kill you. And claw at you and dig in your eyes. I'm like, I may have a weapon on me, you don't know. And I'm like, you just gotta get control. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I'll, they'll be on top and they're just kind of holding me down. And all of a sudden I'll take my hand and just start kind of doing this on their face. And I'll be like, just so you know, I'm digging into your eyes right now. And you'll see them immediately like snap out of it and be like, oh shit, yeah, I gotta remember where we're at. And now when we do those rounds, the moment I even start putting like my hand at their face, they just swat it out of the way, smack me in the face, turn me over. Like, they'll do whatever they need to do, but it's a different headspace than when they're just kind of doing open rounds. But you kind of got to train people to know what the headspace is, and then it gives you like that realistic, like, oh shit, this sucks.
Yeah.
But it is good training. You have to do it. If you're trying to teach self-defense, like, you have to incorporate that stuff into even striking. The amount of guys I've seen that are like high-level black belts in jiu-jitsu but have never struck before, I'm like, guys, you look like you've never thrown a punch in your entire life. Like, you still got to train that stuff. If you're a combat athlete, like, learn how to throw a punch at least.
Yes.
So
we've also trained with the Australian Army, David. So the martial arts program that's used in the Australian Army is called kinetic fighting, and one of the principles they talk about is make use of any available weapons. So when we're talking about the jiu-jitsu gi, right? So there are hundreds of different chokes that you can do, and especially, I mean, if you grab someone in the winter time and throw someone on the concrete, it's like throwing them into the fucking planet. It's insane. So very effective, but there's always this argument about, does the gi transfer to the street? And I play around with hoodie jumpers and jackets and things like that. But what's your thoughts on cross-training or doing a little bit of gi jiu-jitsu, and if that does transfer to self-defense?
I think if anything, I mean, obviously, like, the submissions are always going to be slightly different. But the biggest thing that I think people need to comprehend when it goes to gi for self-defense is the ability to utilize grips to your advantage. Obviously, like no gi, I mean, both gi, no gi, I can work on framing, posting, stuff like that. But like you said, if it's in the middle of the winter, and let's say I grab your sleeve, but I can't get a grip on your hand, well, I can use that sleeve and just stiff arm it across your body, and now your arm is caught inside a jacket. And again, it adds a different element of training, especially if I'm dealing with a bigger guy. It's going to be a lot harder for me to hold a big dude's arm and let him pull his arm free compared to if I'm grabbing the material around that arm. Like, now not only are you trying to break my grip, but you're also trying to get out of your own jacket. And it just adds other elements to it. So again, it's not something where, like, if we get into a fight, I'm going to be like, oh, what are you wearing? All right, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It's just, if that grip is there, I just have to know instinctively, like, yes, I can use that grip to my advantage. And then again, if we're dealing with weapons, it adds a whole nother element of, one, depending on your jacket, I might be able to avoid a couple slashes or strikes because of the fact that I have extra padding. So that adds a layer to things. So yeah, everything translates again, but you have to drill it. If that means it's in the middle of the summer and you're throwing on hoodies and fighting outside to learn how to use grips because you're doing weapon defense that day, then so be it. You have to learn how to use both. And trust me, if you've been doing it long enough, like, there's nothing more annoying than trying to get in on somebody and they're just stuffing your shirt across your face and I can't see. But if you watch, I watched a lot of the videos. Almost every knife encounter that we see, I would say not every, but majority of the knife encounters you see some sort of shirt grab where the guy with the knife is stuffing you with the shirt and then stabbing you at the same time, but you can't deal with the knife until you deal with that grip. So if you don't know how to break the grips, if you don't know how to bypass material grips like you would in a gi, it's going to be very difficult. So again, people are like, oh, I only train no-gi. It's like, that's cool. And trust me, you'll be just fine in most, pretty much a blue belt and above, you should be fine in most street encounters. But if you're trying to teach it, train both so that you know how to incorporate both into it. And then obviously chokes, like, I could hit some cool lapel chokes and stuff with material, and I'm a big fan of chokes for self-defense because of the less damaging impact than like trying to break a limb. But no, I think both have their place for sure.
Yes. So with situational awareness, we hear about situational awareness in martial arts and self-defense. And when it comes to personal protection too, David, it's important. So whether you're in a dark alleyway or in a car park, can you share some tips, especially people that are more interested in self-defense or protection or being better prepared?
I think the biggest thing people need to do is just keep their head up. Situational awareness gets a lot of, it's definitely one of those fluff words that people throw around for advertisement of like, oh, come train this, we'll teach you how to be situationally aware. Or if you want to learn how to protect yourself, you need to be situational aware. And it doesn't really mean anything in that sense. We always kind of just view it as you have to know who's around you, you have to know what's around you, and you react accordingly to what you see. If I see somebody that's kind of giving me the look or following me around a little bit, okay, cool, I've made an observation. What am I going to do with that information now? Am I just going to like, okay, you're staring at me, got it, and I'm going to carry back on with what I'm doing? That's probably not the best decision. If it means like I have to walk back into the store, like, oh shit, I forgot something, let me just walk back in, and I go right up to an employee or say, hey, can you walk me to my car? Or hey, there's this person out there that's, kind of giving me creepy vibes, whatever, can you notify security? What we do based off of what we take in is where that whole idea of being aware comes into play. But you got to be aware to begin with. So the amount of people that I see walking with their heads down and buried into their phones. I try to make eye contact with every single person I see. Sometimes it's that resting bitch face, and I'm just always kind of paying attention to who's around me, and I don't really care if people catch me staring, because it's like something about you is making me want to kind of monitor you, like, what's this dude doing? Or obviously at the gym, I'm always people watching when I'm at the gym, but like even out in public, I will never not at least know who's around me. If I see somebody walk in, I'll kind of monitor them. Where are they going for a little bit? Just little slight things that take a second to do, but at least it's just kind of like a little mental note of, yep, this person was there, that person was there. You can get really paranoid with it, I guess, if you want to be like, oh, what do they got in their pockets? What do they have in their bag? Are they, do I see any pressing on their shirts? Are they carrying anything? Like, you can really get paranoid with some stuff if you want, but in general, it's just know where you're at and then know what to look for based off where you're at. So kind of always play the game of like, where's Waldo? What doesn't fit in this situation? That's typically what I should be paying attention to. If you're in a really nice area and there's someone that just doesn't fit, like we have some areas around here that even we don't fit in if we go there, but if you go to spots like that and you're like, yeah, this person just doesn't fit in, like, just keep an eye on them. May not mean anything, but out of everything here, you're out of place. So I'm going to pay attention to you. Or if we're in a parking lot and it's beautiful cars and then one run down car, it's like, I'm not going to park next to this car. I'm going to park somewhere else because you don't belong here. Again, it's not being rude. It's not being mean. It's not being discriminatory by any means. It's just looking at what is and what isn't and making decisions based off that. And I think people tend to some people take that a little too personally sometimes. I'm like, no, it's about being safe and just knowing like this, especially if you're a parent, if you have your kids with you, if you're with your loved ones, you just kind of have to know like, yeah, we're going to walk a different way today, or nope, we're not going to say anything, just keep on walking. But you have to be aware. You have to have your head up, especially if you're one that carries a weapon on you for personal protection. Obviously around here, you got a lot of people that carry firearms. You need to be aware of what's going on, because the last thing you want to do is get caught off guard while you're carrying something that somebody else could get access to. So
it is too, mate. It's terrifying. It's a terrifying experience. And you posted a fantastic video on intuition and listening to your gut. And just how important it is to obviously, yeah, as you said, don't be on your fucking phone. Look up, look around, have that sense of, if something doesn't look right. And do you what other some of the other things that you talk about within self defense?
In regards to like the awareness type stuff or
Yeah,
like that stuff.
Yeah.
Lately we've kind of just been talking a lot, and it's kind of been more so with like family and friends. I mean, I haven't ran a class here in a minute, but especially with people that we're talking to, it's more so kind of the idea of take the extra time. When you get somewhere, take a few seconds, look at what's going on around you. Again, biggest thing is going to be just get off your phone when you're in the public. If something feels off, react accordingly. If something starts going down, get out of there. Everyone just wants to watch and get on their phones and record what's happening. It's like, get out of there.
Yeah.
You have no idea. And God, the amount of fights I've seen, it's a blessing and a curse, but like the amount of fights that you've seen of something that starts out as a simple argument and everyone's watching, then all of a sudden you just hear gunshots ringing through. And it's like they go from 0 to 100. It's like if you see people in an aggressive verbal argument and you're like, yeah, this isn't right. It's like, pack up your shit, grab the kids, we're out. Like, no questions asked. And like one thing that I'll emphasize with people is have a code word. In two fashions. I tell parents, like, if you have kids, have a code word with your kids so that if they're ever in a situation where they're uncomfortable or they don't want to be there or something happened at a sleepover, whatever, if they text you or tell you the code word in a conversation, no questions asked, you show up, you pick them up, regardless, like something's wrong, go get them. But at the same time, have one with your spouse, like with like my wife and I, if we're out in public and I say it, it's like no questions asked. Put whatever you got in your hands down, unless we, if you're looking, oh, look at it, oh, yep, put it down. We're leaving, no questions asked. Something's wrong. We're getting in the car and we're going somewhere else. Because something just doesn't feel right. And now, typically, that'll come more so from me than her because I'm probably going to be paying attention a lot more than she would be. But I think that's important for families to have those conversations, and it's even more encouraging for both moms, dads, husbands, wives, that they're both actively paying attention, where if one of them sees something and says it, you don't question like, oh no, honey, you're just overreacting. It's like, no, if something is wrong and again, that intuition, if they feel that in their gut, and I think women tend to feel it more than men do. Yeah. So like, especially if a woman comes up and says like, yeah, something's wrong, then again, as the husband, dad, whatever, it's like, yep, all right, we're out. And again, you just don't question it. And I think having those boundaries and understandings with each other is probably a huge thing for families and stuff to have, of just, yeah, if anyone's uncomfortable, we go. I don't think, and again, hopefully you're wrong. Hopefully you just embarrass yourself and you walk away, and that's the end of it. The other thing that we'll tell people in addition to that is be rude. If something, if you're giving me bad vibes, if I have to tell you, like, you know what, dude, just back the fuck off. I'm sorry, back the fuck off. And you could be the nicest guy in the world, but if I'm getting bad vibes from you, it's like, be rude. Like, you don't owe anyone an apology. And if later you turn out that everything was in fact okay and you just embarrass yourself, you can go back later and be like, you know what, funny story, this happened, blah blah blah, I apologize, you want to go grab lunch, let me make it up to you, let's go grab lunch. But best case scenario is you just saved your own life because something happened. So we're just trying to do, at the end of the day, like when I'm teaching self-defense, my job is to encourage people to not get themselves into situations as much as possible. But I want them to understand how, I always tell people it's a couple things. One, I want you to know that you're capable of defending yourselves. I think that's one thing that a lot of people struggle with, is like, oh, bigger, stronger people. Is like, it's going to be hard. It's not easy, but you could do it. I want people to know how to avoid the fights, but I want people to understand what violence is. And I think a lot of people are disconnected from, like, oh yeah, I've heard that this happens. Like, have you seen it? Have you seen somebody getting stabbed? Have you seen somebody getting shot? Have you seen a kid getting pummeled on the ground? And as much as I don't like watching those videos, and it's not to like desensitize myself. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from them. Yeah. And a lot of it's like, when people are like, well, that would never happen. It's like, well, I watched 5 videos today, and in all 5 videos this happened. And that's what it's like we're paying attention to. And sure, like, there are definitely some videos I've come across where it's like, I don't think I could ever watch that again. Yeah. But I'm going to, because there's a couple of details that I think are critical for law enforcement, for civilians, for moms, whatever. And the benefit to having social media is that people post this shit, And so as self-defense instructors, we can take this information, send it amongst ourselves, and be like, hey, Eli, can you break this down for me? Eli, what did you see in this situation? And he's one that's big in the self-defense realm as well. And that's actually how I met him, was through some of our self-defense groups. So, I'll send stuff to him. I'll send stuff to the other guys in our group and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Before I tell you my opinion. And we'll just kind of spitball ideas and be like, how would you teach that? Or how would you approach this as an instructor's point of view? And it's a good way for us to learn and just educate people on, like, this is how our just like you watch high-level jiu-jitsu and be like, hey, this is how we're going to start setting up our takedowns because that's working at this level. It's like, okay, here's how we're going to start setting up our disarms because this is how situations are happening. So
yes,
it's film study. It's just not the prettiest film to study, but
yes. Yeah, David, one thing that's quite alarming in Australia at the moment, mate, is we've had a 30% increase in crime across the country. And a few months ago, there was a stabbing that occurred in a shopping centre in Sydney. Six people got...
at the mall, right?
Yeah, 6 people got brutally stabbed and died. And
I saw that.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is very important that we can talk about as well is training, especially in martial arts. I think it's great, but at the same time, there needs to be some education and self-defense with regards to being able to handle incidents like that in dangerous situations. But what a hypothetical scenario like that, and you've come across somebody with an individual with a knife in a shopping centre, what are some of the things that people can do in that situation?
Well, I can tell you, and I'll say this strictly from watching. I saw two big things when I was watching, because I think after the day or two later is when a lot of the different footage started kind of coming out of what was going on. And I saw two really big things that I think people need to understand. Number one, there was one instance where the guy was coming up an escalator with a knife, and the guy was at the top of the escalator with like a chair or something.
Yeah,
and he was
yeah.
Like, that's a huge thing. Is like, if I can't run per se, or if you're trying to be, like, again, I don't know, given that circumstance, the guy probably could have booked it pretty quickly out of there, especially because he was still coming up the escalator. You can't run up those things super fast. So if he's trying to, buy some time for, everyone else to get out, fucking hero in my eyes at that case. But either way, let's just say it's a situation where maybe you can't run away. Well, then you need to learn how to use objects to create barriers between you and it doesn't mean like, oh, this guy's got a knife. Like, all right, I got to get hands on. It's like, even with all your training, I should still try to, especially if it's just a blade, where they have to be close. Let's try and just maintain that distance. So if I can grab a chair or any sort of barrier and just hold it between us, that's great. The other thing I saw on the flip side was people literally just stopped and just watched as this man would stab somebody and then just walk towards them, and they're still kind of like, what's this guy doing? And they're with their kids. And I'm pretty sure there was one instance where it was like a mom and her daughter, and they're just standing there watching this guy attack somebody and then start walking towards them, and they're still not moving. I'm like, I understand, like, you might just be frozen in place, but get out of there. Like, that's the thing that people need to realize, is it's not time. I carry personal protection for me and my wife and my family.
Yes.
But if you're getting attacked, I'm getting them out. If I'm by myself, then sure. If there's a chance that I will step in and try to help out a situation if I deem it possible to do. But if I'm with any of my loved ones, I don't care. No offense, I don't care about you. I don't care about anyone else. I'm getting them out of there because that's my responsibility. Is like, I don't want to put myself at risk to help somebody else, which in turn may also put my loved ones at risk. Like, I'm going to get them out. If I'm by myself, then it might be a different circumstance. I might try and hold a barrier and be like, everyone just get out. I'm going to hold this guy here as long as I can, get as many people out as possible. Just because I have some of that experience where it's like, I might be comfortable enough to hang out here. But I think people need to just understand that those situations, they happen quick. And a lot of times you may not even realize what's going on, but if you see it, get out of there. There's no question. There's no like, oh, let me record this. There's no reason for me to, even if I'm on a floor above, there's no reason for me to pull up my phone and record from the floor above. It's just get out. Because again, if there's one, there could be two, there could be three. He may not just have a blade. It depends on what's going on. But those are the two biggest things. Is like, you're going to get people that are smart and trying to like slow them down. And then you get people that just stand there and just watch. And I think that's a perfect example of what people do in real life across the world in those scenarios.
Are there any specific techniques or strategies that can be particularly effective in preventing knife attacks?
I think the biggest thing is you're gonna have to pay attention to body language. We do a lot of drilling for watching key body signs. One of them is being like the high pitched elbow.
Yeah.
Obviously that's gonna be one thing if we're point blank talking with each other compared to if I see you down the hall. But that goes back to my point before where if you see people in a verbal argument, pay attention to some of the signs. Like if I'm watching this argument, it's like, well, is this just like two people disagreeing or is this going to turn into something else? And then if I see like a high pitched elbow, I'm like, that dude's reaching for something, we're out.
Yes.
But if it's like point blank and I'm engaged in that argument and I see the person I'm engaged with go for the high pitched elbow, then I'm getting hands on right away. I'm either hitting you as hard as I possibly can or I'm grabbing that arm as quickly as I can and putting pressure on it because that's a very distinguished. That's not like I'm scratching. Like I'm pulling something out and you're getting that elbow pitch. That's a very distinguished weapon draw sign. So stuff like that, yes. Then we'll get like 2-on-1 grips. It could be like a 2-on-1 baseball grip if they actually deploy it. It could just be kind of like almost like a Russian tie type grip or a key weave or key lock type grip. So it all just kind of depends. But those are again drill that stuff and take seminars with people that are going to put you in live drills where all of a sudden someone's going to draw and you got to react like, oh shit, and I got to get hands on. Other than that, the biggest thing to understand if we're talking blades is if you are engaged in a fight with someone, you're going to get cut and you're going to get stabbed. That's inevitable. If you don't, God bless you, but it's going to happen. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is get hands on as fast as you can. With pressure, don't just grab their wrist, but like put pressure on it and then start breaking stuff. Don't try and do disarms. Don't try and do anything fancy. I get hands on. The moment I have any sort of control, it's like, okay, damage time. If that means I slam you to the ground, if that means I slam your head into the concrete, like at that point, it's life or death.
Yes.
So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to end it. So I think that's where people's like, oh, I got this. And then they're trying to do all these fancy takedowns. And yeah, you're going to be running around and scrambling a bit, but like my goal is to establish control, and the moment I have any sense of like, yep, you're kind of stuck now, I'm applying damage as fast as I can. And I think that's as simple as it can get. There's no need to do fancy gimmicks, fancy disarms. Yeah. It's control and damage. Those are the two biggest things I would say.
Yeah, you touched on some interesting points there too, David. And one of them is how you train is generally how you're going to perform in a street fight. And a good friend of mine, he's a Krav Maga specialist. His name is Trent Buffett, and he has a wealth of knowledge in self-defense. And he uses the analogy of kind of like you're in a restaurant and there's too many options to choose from on the menu. So he talks about Hick's law, and he talks about that when you're under stress, sometimes what will happen is your brain kind of gets hijacked. And you want to kind of choose the correct skill. So in Krav Maga, they do a technique called bursting where they move in and they defend and attack at the same time.
Right.
But with regards to martial arts training, this is something that I think it needs to be implemented is how do you teach students to deal with that adrenaline dump, to be able to, because there's three things that are going to happen, either fight, flight, or fright. You're either going to fight for your life, you're going to freeze up and say, oh, fuck, what do I do? Or you're going to run away.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that adrenaline dump? What do you do?
I think that's where I tell people like you need to take combat sports.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest gap is like I said, when we did our sparring back in like Tae Kwon Do, and it wasn't point sparring, two things that I realized. Number one, when we're practicing, okay, somebody grabs you here, I'm going to break the grips, and I do a sweep, and we repeat that over and over and over again. And then when it got into sparring, like none of that happened. Everyone's throwing big punches, and like everyone's just trying to hit each other. So like there's a big disconnect, but it hadn't like clicked with me yet. When I started taking boxing, and I was sparring with, again, by that point I was end of high school, going into college, so I was a little bit older, so I was able to do a little bit of the higher level sparring classes, and I got rocked a couple times, and like I went into like complete survival mode, just shield up, and again, guys were sparring, so guys are going to take that opportunity to just start, they would back off the pressure a little bit, but they would just continuously pummel you with punches, and so I learned like, okay, this sucks, and I have to do something, so I brought that back to our gym. at the Tae Kwon Do school, and kind of just told people, said, hey, let's spar a little bit harder. Let's just put a little bit more oomph. And everyone just started beating the piss out of each other. And it was good. It was fun because it was kind of like a good eye opener for everyone. Eventually, the instructors kind of had to stop it because they just didn't like it. But that's a different story. But the students were like, yeah, this is a good reality check of this is what it's like. And so I encourage people, like, if you're training self defense, if you've never been in a real fight, right? If you've been in a real fight, win or lose, you know what a real fight looks like. And I don't just mean like somebody throws a punch at you, you throw a punch back, and that's it. I mean, like, you're on the ground, you're throwing multiple punches, getting punched, people are trying to pull, like a fight. If you've never been in one of those, then you need to go into combat sports. And if you've never sparred, you can't fight. Period. I don't care what anyone else says. If you've never stood across from another person with them intent on hurting you, you can't fight. Now, that being said, sparring is one level of it. Go compete. If you've never competed, where somebody's now, like sparring, I'm sure, as you know, striking or grappling, you're going to have some days where it's like a little bit lighter sparring. You're going to have some days where it feels like we're trying to kill each other. It just depends on who you're with that day. But competition, you're always going to have somebody that's trying to kill you. And so I think if you've never sparred at a high level or you've never competed before, you definitely can't fight. And I think that's the best way to kind of learn that. And so one of the ways, if you want to incorporate that into your self-defense training, you get guys like Craig Douglas, who starts doing his evolutions. So you do like a 10, 12-hour training day, and then he puts you into a live scenario at the end that's full contact. And it's people beating the piss out of each other with weapons involved. And people that, like, my dad has never thrown a punch in his life, and I dragged him to that class, and he got his ass kicked and like was terrified. And he's like, my head hurts, this hurts. And by day 2, he was so much better because he now had an understanding, like, not better necessarily technique wise, but better mentality wise, because he just went through the ringer on Saturday, and by Sunday he's like, yep, I know what my body's going to do now, so I can overcome that. And then he was able to at least try and fight off a little bit better or protect himself better. But obviously those that were more experienced were able, like, if anything, it teaches you how to stay calm in those situations where, like, I know what it's going to feel like, I know it's going to suck, but I also know I can get out of it. And I think that's a big part of, like, the combat sport training, which is where I think people need to incorporate a lot of training, is somebody's trying to hold you down against your will, somebody's punching you and you're uncomfortable. How do I stay calm in that and still fight back? I think that's kind of like the big missing piece for kind of, that's the only way that I've been able to get people to learn, like, the fight, flight, or freeze, is put them in those as close as you can get in a safe environment, unless you've already been in it. But
have you ever had to use your martial arts in the street?
Not in a very serious manner. I got into a lot of fights in elementary school, middle school. Just trading punches. College, I got into a couple bar fights. Mostly trying to break up fights. It was never a fight of me getting pissed off at somebody, because I just let that shit go. But it would be me trying to break up a fight, and then fights would turn on me. And that's when I learned to stop breaking up fights, because it's not like I got in 2 or 3 bar fights that, one of them turned into a pretty big brawl. Like, we got pushed out into the street and we were rolling around in the street and the concrete, punching, kicking each other. And I was like, yeah, fuck this. And my buddy even grabbed me. He's like, dude, just get out of here. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And we just like screw these guys. Like, I'm not even going to try. And again, especially if you're drinking or anything into it and you're like, oh, let me put on my sober face. It's like, no, just get out of there. There's no need to break up anything. But have I had to use it in the sense of, like, somebody tried to rob me or try and start something with me? No, I've been able to avoid that. Or I just look like the dude. If I look at you, I try and give you that look of, like either, we're cool, or we're cool, but don't come any closer. And I'll happily send off those vibes. But I understand the risks. I understand the law, but I understand, like, the physical risks of getting into street fights. It's like, it's not worth it. There's no need to prove it. I don't even want to do. I've only competed in grappling. I've never competed in boxing. I've never competed in MMA. I have no interest to do so, because it's like, why do I want to sit there and just get my head punched in? Like, I know what that feels like. I've sparred heavily. I've sparred at high levels. I know what it feels like. I have no need to go and stand across the ring. Oh, well, you got to see if you can fight. It's like, I know I can fight. I'm confident in my ability to fight. I can hold you off in sparring just fine, and you're a trained fighter. You think I can't handle a thug off a street? I said, there's no need for me to go, and then I watch these guys go and get concussions and stuff. I'm like, I don't need that.
Yeah. But we had an epidemic, David, many years ago, In Australia, it's called a coward punch. We call it a coward punch, which is basically a king
like a sucker
hit.
punch. Yeah.
A sucker punch. Yeah, we call it a coward punch or a king hit, but we call
like
we call it a coward punch because it is. It's a shit cunt act to do.
Yeah.
Is to hit someone without them looking, and we had a very much a growing epidemic. And
that was actually, we had that here in New York too.
Really?
Recently. Yeah.
Really? Yeah, dudes were just getting king hit.
They were doing it to women though.
Oh, really?
They would just walk down the street, and I'm from Chicago, but it was all over the news of like women would just be walking down the street, and a guy would just come up from behind and just sucker punch them in the face and run off. But
was it like a game that they were doing? What? That's just
it was just a thing. Yeah, it was but I do remember seeing what you were talking about. Like that for whatever reason that type of shit was going viral.
Yeah,
and tons of different areas.
It was really sad, mate. There was an individual. This was in because I'm in Brisbane, which is just above Sydney, and there was an incident that happened in Brisbane where I am, and he was an up and coming Olympic water polo player. He's just turned 18. He's out on the night out with his friends. An altercation happened. One of his mates just come up and king hit him in the side of the head. He's fallen down, hit his head on the concrete, and he's died. Both lives are destroyed. The other person that's king hit him is now in jail. Both lives are completely destroyed. And this is the thing, mate. I think people really don't understand violence, do they? I mean, what is it that most people don't understand about violence, in your opinion?
I think it's the repercussions of it.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how fast it escalates, and I don't think people truly comprehend the levels of where the repercussions that it could get to. Obviously, depending on where you're located, the law is going to handle things differently. You might get a slap on the wrist. You might be years in prison. That's all politics and wherever you live. But I think the biggest thing that people don't understand is how quickly things can go from 0 to 100. And it all depends on who you're talking to that day. We always said this growing up with like school shootings around here where, I don't know how familiar you are with all the school shootings, but like the Columbine when I was a kid, that was the first big school shooting, and it was very interesting, and I actually encourage a lot of people to watch it. They recorded everything leading up to the shooting. They documented all their thought process. They documented how they got the guns and why they did it, and it was very eye-opening. And again, I encourage people to watch it because it's like they were giving everyone the answers. They were telling people through their conversations, through their body language, through everything that something was going to happen. But
the writing was on the wall.
And people weren't listening to it, and they just didn't realize how much poking the bear was going to escalate the violence. And they're like, we're just done. We've had enough. We just can't do it anymore. We've had enough. And I think that's a prime example right there. Like, people don't realize what someone's going through that day. You could just simply shove somebody or call them a name, and they just decide to shoot you.
Yeah.
And both lives are now ruined because you just made a huge mistake just shooting somebody for no reason. Like, sure, they put their hands on you. That doesn't justify you shooting them. And I think that's the other thing is people don't understand, like, the legal action for reaction. Like, if someone punches you in the face, that doesn't mean you pull out a gun and you shoot them in the face. There's rules, and that's why we encourage people to learn how to fight. Yeah. Because just carrying a gun, people want to resort to the gun for everything. So I think that's the biggest thing that people don't understand. It's like, obviously, yes, the repercussions. There's always going to be repercussions, which is even more reason. And even my student, I told him that. I said, and I don't think he's getting jail time, but they threatened him with 5 years. From like 15 to 20, he was going to be locked up is what they were pushing for. Yeah. For a school fight. And I told him, I said, if you don't get locked up, I said, use that as a fucking lesson. I said, you're 15 and you almost just got locked up for 5 years. I said, you think you would last 5 years in prison? I said, hell no. I said, you wouldn't last a fucking day. I'm like, yeah, you're tough when somebody's back's up against the wall. But I said, in there, you're going to be up against the wall every day. And I think people need to kind of comprehend what the reality is of that stuff. So,
David, we had a mass shooting in Australia. This was in 1996, mate. And I understand America and Australia are two vastly different countries. There's there's many different things that we can talk about, in particular gun control and all that sort of stuff, but I'm in no position to lecture the public on gun control. And we haven't had another mass shooting since, but we're starting to see now a spike in gun violence in Australia. So with everything that goes on in your country, mate, with school shootings and things like that, how can the public be better prepared against an active shooter?
Yeah, this is a tricky, obviously this is like the big debate. And I actually didn't start carrying until halfway through COVID. Yes. That's kind of when shit kind of really started hitting the fan. And I'm like, not only are we having these big mass casualty events, I was like, but we're just having people just go crazy. And just people that are just being isolated that are now just snapping. I'm like, I need to carry, because this is just so, like, in the big picture, like, yeah, you have to go through, like, every school, every building has to have some like, unfortunately, that's just it's just now a part of our life, you know. Like, I'm sure when the first tornado hit in the world, people are like, what the fuck is this? And then another tornado, and then finally people are like, yeah, we need to do something, because these tornadoes are just going to keep happening and we can't stop it. Well, shootings, unfortunately, are going to keep happening, and we can't, you know, whether it's gang violence, whether it's a pissed off employee, or whether it's some kid that just got pushed too many times at school and decides to just unload on school. It's the new reality of this is what it is. And people can try and make arguments all day long. It's like, well, this shouldn't happen, and, you know, we shouldn't have to go through this trains. Like, I agree, and I shouldn't have to know how to fight. But the reality is, it's going to happen whether it's your school or another school. So I think schools across the board have to implement something. People need to, if you really want to get political, people need to invest the money into education to have the proper resources at school. You got to have proper metal detectors. You have to have proper lockdown procedures. You have to have proper police officers or security on campus that will protect the students. And again, if somebody rolls up and they just see, and I've seen, actually, I'll give props to some of these guys. I've seen, like, off-duty cops or off-duty security or former veterans that'll sit outside schools armed and just sit there and just take on their own dime, and will just monitor who's coming in and out of the building to protect the kids. Or they won't be with the school, but they'll park across the street from the school and just hang out at their own time. So I think, obviously, like, you know, implementing stuff like that is one thing. I think the other thing is people kind of need to realize that gun violence isn't going away. So removing the big argument, obviously, that I'm sure you hear too, is half the country wants guns removed. The other half is like, let us keep our guns. I think I'm not saying the answer is to have our guns. I think that helps. But I think then on top of that, you need people to then train with those guns, because now the issue that you'll have is, like, people will buy these guns. Well, is it a qualified person holding that gun? Do they know how to fight? Do they know do they know when they're supposed to draw the gun? Or are they just going to be ones like, oh shit, you pushed me, I'm going to pull this out and shoot you? Like, that's now where the next level of training is like, okay, I'm going to carry this, but now I need to go take some classes to know what it's like when I can't get access to it, because now a lot of people will buy a gun and then think that this is the answer to everything, and that's not the case. But that being said, like, even some of my family who was super against me getting one to begin with is now kind of like, yeah, I think I need to get one too. And they're just realizing, like, it's not stopping. And it's like,
it's not going away.
It's not going away. And I think people are so, like, at least by us, everyone's always, like, hyper focused on the ARs. And they think, oh, the ARs, and everyone's like, a gun is a gun. If it's a handgun, if it's a rifle, if it's a machine gun, a gun is a gun. It's just a matter of how many people are going to die faster just due to the capabilities of it. But I said, if I shoot you with any of those, it's going to do the same damage across the board. So I'm like, stop trying to, like, ban one or this or do, like, it's guns. It's just gun violence as a whole.
It's all guns.
It's all guns. And again, if you look at, like, gang violence, at least in the U.S., it's all handguns.
Yeah.
You know, so, like, in the grand scheme of things, if you really want to pull up statistics, handguns are, like, the highest one, especially because I can hide that. Like, if you see somebody walking down the street with an AR, it's kind of hard to miss it.
You can fucking see it.
Yeah. But a pistol, I could finagle a pistol into a lot of places, and you're going to have no idea that I have that shit on me. Those are the ones you got to watch out for. So I think people just kind of need to, and again, this goes back to people just understanding violence. You have to kind of just look at it from a non-political standpoint and just be like, this is what it is. This is what's happening. We just have to know how to adapt. And again, if I were to, and I think there's actually a district in Texas, because there was a couple school shootings in Texas, and I think one of the districts actually allowed the teachers to carry on school grounds. And if I
Yeah.
was a kid to shoot up a school, walking in knowing that like, hey, there could be 10 teachers in here armed, like fuck
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
going there. And it definitely deters people from starting shit when it's like, yeah, that dude could be carrying.
Yeah, one thing that was fucking crazy, David. Like I've been to the States a few times, mate, and I went to Texas, and I couldn't believe there was just literally everyone was open
Yeah.
because you can open carry, can't
Yeah.
you? You can open carry
Yeah.
a firearm in Texas.
Yeah.
It's crazy,
Yeah.
mate.
You know what? It's the equivalent of having cauliflower ear. You look at somebody with cauliflower ear, like I'm not gonna fuck with that. Like
Yeah.
I was part of a clothing brand for a while, and we were doing like a meet and greet, and so like I was backstage with a lot of the other athletes, and I was the only one there who fought. Everyone else is like bodybuilders and shit. I was a fighter, and they're all like talking shit to each other and like, yeah, I could kick your ass, I could kick your ass, and then they like looked at me, and I had a big ear at the time, and I had a black eye,
Yeah.
like not him, but like that guy, and that guy's
Yeah.
like. I'm like, if I have a gun strapped to my waist, it's the same premise. It's like,
Yeah.
that guy may not know shit, but the fact that he's carrying, it's like, he could be a phenomenal shot and just
Yeah.
knows how to handle a gun. Like, I'm not going to fuck with him. So I think, like, I just think that's what it is. And then I think people, like, if you are going to carry something like that, then you got to have it with you everywhere you go.
Yes.
At least where you're allowed to go. I just think that, unfortunately, now, like, some states, like New York, is very strict. California, very strict. So, unfortunately, two areas where you get a lot of issues. There's not really much you can do about it from a civilian if you live there, but
Yeah, because at the time, David, so in 1996 when we had a mass shooting, so I can't remember how old I was, but I remember my dad, he owned rifles, and when that tragedy happened, the former Prime Minister at the time, the Australian Prime Minister John Howard, implemented a gun buyback scheme. So what happened was people that own guns were able to actually be compensated for their firearms. They would hand them in, and then I think there was over 250,000 guns that were destroyed. He also, at the time, implemented a law to restrict private ownership of semi-automatic weapons. And the only people, I guess, that do carry guns in Australia are obviously the police, people that shoot, animals on rural areas and things like that. But do you think that gun control could work to some places in America, do you think?
I don't think so. Not to that extent, no. They have done buyback programs. I know that's actually pretty common. I think the problem is the accessibility of guns and how easy it is to not only get a gun but like get some serious hardware. If you really want to get some serious hardware, and it's like I can get some serious hardware from good guys. I could probably get the same stuff from bad guys. But like I know good, trusted law enforcement based people where it's like, hey, I want this, and they're like, all right, yeah, give me a week and I could have it. But I could also go to the hood and be like, yo, I want this, and I could get it as well. So I think
you can always get it off.
You can always get it, and I think that's just the thing. It's like it's out there. So I encourage people. It's like, again, not one that I'm like pushing for. Like, oh, everyone should have a gun. It's like if you feel the need to carry one, then train with it. Know how to use it. Know how to fight. And I always will come back to that. I will always, and anytime I'm giving advice like that, whether you carry a blade, a knife, pepper spray, a gun, anything, it's like know how to fight. At the end of the day. Yeah. If you can't access any of this stuff, like know how to fight. Because if I, at the same time, as I said earlier, if I know how to fight, I'm less likely to resort to more violence because I'm comfortable dealing with this violence.
Yes.
Like when that becomes too much for me to handle, that's when I now resort to this. But it's not like A to B right away.
Yeah. Yes.
But no, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Unfortunately, like people a lot of times ask me, I'm like, rather than me try to solve the problem, I'm just going to adapt and just
do your best. Do the best you can.
Yeah, this is what it is. This is what it is. Like instead of just like trying to point blame and constantly trying to fight it, because people aren't going to give up their guns.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is like obviously that's one beautiful part about the country is that you have the freedom to own those guns if you want to. Yeah. But at the same time, I just have to acknowledge that like this is, and I just have to do what I can.
Do you want to know something that's really amazing, David? And I talk to different people all in Australia, and obviously I've been in the martial arts for a long time, but some of the kindest, some of the most nicest people I've ever met in my life are trained killers.
Oh, yeah.
And these people that obviously have the capacity to inflict violence, they are so nice. They're so friendly. They are kind. They're not the type of people that would go fucking shoot up a school, would they?
No. Well, I think it's twofold. One, I think it helps a lot with mental health. I think that. I think obviously, like if you really want to solve the gun problem, I think a lot of it is you got to do better with mental health. You gotta address that issue a lot better as a country. But I think like a good way to fight mental health is be active, and I think martial arts is a great thing to do because you could have a bad day and just come in and like I've got one cop that works in sex crimes that trains with me, and there's days he'll come in and be like, hey man, how are you doing? He's like, I just need to roll. I'm like, got it. I'm like, no questions asked. Don't need to be like, oh, well, tell me what's going on. It's like, you just want to have a good, hard training session and just get your mind off shit. Like, yep, that's what we're here for. And so, like, I think that's a good thing. But yeah, no, I like the SEALs that I know, the Feds, the SWAT. Like, I've worked with high level departments, and it's like you'll come across an occasional dick or two, but I'm like, they are the nice. But really, and I say this all the time, like, if you go to a jiu-jitsu tournament, it's the nicest place in the world. I said, everyone's a badass fighter. Everyone could drink and have a great time. And the only time that you're going to find any problems is when a non-fighter comes in and starts talking shit. Then the fighters are going to get on them. But I said, when it's all just a bunch of fighters, I said, I can't ever tell you a moment where I've seen fighters get into the face of other fighters if it wasn't started by somebody else talking smack. Everyone's just chill. Everyone just has a good... Because everyone knows, like, oh... I may be able to beat you, but I can't beat that guy. But that guy can beat me, and he can beat you. And it's just like there's always someone better in the room. You just have a good time.
And I also think too, David, that we wouldn't have all the bullshit and fuckery that we have in the world today if people did train combat sports or martial arts, because it's that saying, Jordan Peterson, he said, I think the quote goes, a harmless man is not a good man, a dangerous man is a good man but has it under voluntary control. So being strong, being dangerous, having the capacity for violence, but then learning how to control it makes you a good person. That makes you a better person for society as well. And do you think, mate, that I think they need to sort of try and incorporate this into schools as well, to educate kids on, how to avoid confrontation, how to get out of, altercations, do you think they should implement that in schools?
I do, and I've been called into a few high schools just to talk about violence because there'd be a lot of school fights, and obviously a lot of my kids are in high school, so either they'd show me the videos or teachers that I know would send me videos, or I would just find them online, and I'm like, this shit's just getting out. Like, people just need to understand like how stupid this is. It's like I would come in and have conversations with stuff, and like I would get into the faces of the kids that I knew were like, oh, I'm the tough dude, or whatever. It's like, you're tough until somebody like just doesn't give a shit. Yes, and it's like, sure, you might be bigger than me, but are you willing to die fighting right now? Because I could. Like, I'll throw down. Let's go. And, like, you guys, you just have different people and different mentalities. It's like, go train and just know, like, again, you could be the toughest dude in the world, but just always know that there's someone better. Yeah. There's something that could go wrong. And then, as you know, in the fight world, I mean, you watch any UFC fight, there's almost always going to be a situation where some dude just gets a lucky punch and knocks the dude out cold, and he was getting his ass kicked. And that's how quickly things can change, too. So, again, you could be the best dude in the world. You could be bigger, stronger, and the little scrawny kid gets one lucky shot on you and, like, ends your world. So, yeah, I think people need to – I think it's great for kids from, like, a disciplinary perspective. It's fun. It's active. But I think the combat sports in particular, I think it's good to get in at an early age because, one, you can learn how to protect yourself. But, two, you're less likely to then go out and start stuff because – not only do you get all that energy and aggression out in a safe environment, but you also know how fast things can escalate. There's no need to do it out there.
Yes.
And you're less likely to get picked on. Like, anyone that you know is like, oh, they're combat, like, oh, this guy boxes, oh, this guy wrestles. Like, nobody messed with the wrestlers in school. I don't know any wrestler that ever got picked on because, one, they had no neck, ears were massive, and they're just solid muscles. Like, why nothing about this kid says that I should fight him.
Wrestlers are impressive, mate. Like,
no, they're different. They're a different breed.
And I'm sure you've wrestled with a lot of wrestlers in jiu-jitsu as well, mate. They definitely are. Mate, talk to me about drink spiking. You put a video up on Instagram. It was fantastic. You were talking about drink spiking and some of the dangers and the precautions that people need to implement. But what are some tips and what are some ways that people can better protect themselves, especially on a night out in the town, to prevent themselves from becoming a victim to drink spiking?
I think the biggest thing is pay attention to your drinks.
Yeah.
It happens quick, and again, that just comes from my work with a lot of females and dealing with kind of a lot of the sexual assaults and stuff. And a majority of the time, it happened from drink spiking. But pay attention to your drinks. If you leave your drink unattended, buy a new drink. If you don't see your drink getting poured, don't drink it. Don't accept drinks from strangers. And then obviously like Nightcap and other companies like that have like covers for the drinks, like invest in them. You know, again, it's just something of like cool. It may not be the cool hip thing to do, but where something it's like a problem. And I think in Boston, they were having an epidemic, and I still think they're having a big problem with drink spiking. Nashville was having the same issue as well, where tons of people's drinks, like everything from just your average person up to like celebrities were getting drink spiked.
Really? Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, and so people are like, it's happening. So again, rather than trying to blame people or do it's like adapt. Like I'm kind of past the point of like putting the blame on anyone in particular, or like, oh, we should educate people not to do this. I'm like, well, they're going to keep doing it. So rather than that, I'm just going to tell you, like, unfortunately, this is the way things are. Cover your drinks, protect your drinks, be with people that you trust. Because the problem is most of the time when that drug gets in your system, by the time you realize it's in there, it's too late. Like it kicks in incredibly quick.
What is the kind of drug that most people spike drinks
with? I think
with?
it's GHB, I think is the name of it. Roofies or GHB.
It's a roofie,
kind of it. Yeah, it's a roofie, some form of that. But
what are the symptoms? What happens if you ingest that?
As far as my understanding is, I think it's like within like 15 minutes it's in you. Like it's taken effect. Like it's quick.
Wow.
And it'll be, you know, like 8 hours or so that you're just blacked out. Don't know what's going on.
Like unconscious? Like are you asleep?
Yes and no. Like I've heard stories of people that are unconscious. I've heard people that kind of just go limp and just can't really control their bodies. Like you'd have to help me pretty much everywhere I go. And then some people that just have no idea what happened. Like it's just a blackout for half the day. But like I've seen people that have been hospitalized from it because their body rejects it. A lot of people will just start vomiting. I think it'll make you appear as if you had been drinking for like 2 days straight. Like you were just plastered drunk, but it's like, and that's where people will get weird about. It's like, oh, they had one drink, and they're like, that's where a lot of like the friends, like when we've talked with these people, where the friends will come up and say, yeah, we knew something wasn't right because they barely had anything to drink, or we were drinking more than they were, and they were way gone. So like, they're like, it kind of just hits a level where like from an outside perspective, you could look at them and be like, that's not right. But like in the moment, I'm not quite sure what you would feel, other than it just feels like you just drank a shit ton of booze. Other than the fact that you just have no recollection of what happened and really no muscle control of what your body's doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned Nightcap too, David, and it's a fantastic product, mate. Whoever fucking designed that,
it's genius.
Genius.
She was in college and she designed it. Like right before COVID.
Can you talk about Nightcap?
It's a scrunchy. I have one. I thought I had it, but I don't. It's a scrunchie that has a drink cover inside. So it was designed for females initially, because obviously that was where more of the problem is you see more females getting drink spiked than males.
Yes.
Happens to both, but again, statistically, you're going to see it more with females. So it's a scrunchie with a cover protected inside of it. But I mean, like now they've started to come up with things for all sorts of drinks. So like now you can even get like little bottle caps.
Oh,
so
wow.
They have like little bottle caps. So like now they're just coming up with like drink covers. So initially it was a discreet way of hiding it, so that people weren't always aware that you had it with you.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of just turned into, because of how big of an issue it's become, it's like, we're just going to come up with cool looking drink covers for cans, beer bottles, big drinks, small drinks. Like we have a cover for everything essentially. And it's just, it's their way of, again, it's not foolproof. But if I were to walk by, like, you know, I can't just drop something in. It's like now I have to remove something, drop it, and cover it back up type thing. So it's the same thing. If I come back and I could tell, like, hey, someone manipulated my cover and I could tell it's not right, I'm gonna order a new drink. So it's also like kind of
Yeah.
like a check plan of like, yeah, this doesn't look right. This isn't how I set it up or whatever the case is. But
Yeah.
again, it's just one of those things like, I've got one on our when we go out. I mean, I really don't drink to begin with, but no, it's just taking again accepting what
Yeah.
is and adapting to it. I think that goes all the way back to like your situational awareness at the beginning of just understanding the way the world is these days. And whether we're talking gun violence, drink spiking, fights in general, it's just like, here's what is,
Yeah.
here's what I'm now doing in my life to adjust. Like we just constantly have to. Hopefully, in 10 years, one of these problems or all these problems aren't as bad as they are now. But for the time being, it's kind of like a hot spot across the world that violence is just at an all time high these days, and
Yeah.
we just kind of have to adapt.
And what are some of the stats that you've read about, man, with regards to drink spiking? You said in particular women
Yeah.
are obviously more
So
acceptable.
I've when I was in school, I actually worked with a lot of males who had been sexually assaulted, who had been drink spiked and stuff. But the bigger
Really?
issues is they just don't talk about it. So like
Wow.
when I was in the space working with them, or when I was running classes and they would come in and chat, or I would do a presentation and guys would pull me aside afterwards and like thank me for having those conversations, either because of a brother of theirs or them themselves, a friend of theirs. It happens quite a lot. You just from like I'm a male, I'm just not publicly coming out and saying it. But a lot of the
Yeah.
guys that I know that have been drink spiked, it was by accident.
Wow.
Or like friends fucking with each other, of like, oh, I'm just gonna put this in their drink when they're not looking and fuck with them. I hear more of women actually getting assaulted as a result of it. Men, I always heard more of just fucking around with each other.
Yeah.
But I know that it happens on both. Because I've also
Yeah.
known females that have fucked around with other females, or friends that have fucked around with females, and they just put it in their drinks just to have fun, but they don't do anything with it. It's just like, I respect your
Yeah.
drink. So like that's the other problem is people are doing it as like a joke. But again, if your body rejects those drugs, you could end up in a hospital. So
Yes.
again,
Yeah.
it's just stupid games, stupid prizes.
And it's as I said, mate, it's a genius invention. Like the nightcap, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a brother
genius.
it's a brother and a sister. And I hooked up with them before college, or not college, before COVID. They were still in college, and I stumbled across their product and reached out to them right away. I was like, I love this. I'm like, this thing is absolutely genius.
Yeah. Are you sponsored by them?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I was like, so anytime I run any sort of self-defense class, or if we're doing like the college-bound classes for like girls getting ready to go off to school, they always send me a bunch to give out to all the girls and everything to go off. So like I try to only stick to stuff that I truly think is impactful. And I think that's definitely one of those products that's like, you're going to go out and drink. I'm not stupid. Like, you're going to go out, you're going to have a good time. So make sure you're at least protecting your drinks, and this is what the reality of things are. So make sure you're at least doing that too. But
Yeah, that's fantastic, mate. David, one of the saddest and most tragic stories that ever happened here in Australia, mate, was a little boy named Daniel Morecambe. So this boy was about 13 years old. He was abducted at a bus station in 2003 by a well-known Australian pedophile, and he was sexually assaulted and was murdered. And this individual is obviously now in jail, but no one knew where Daniel Morecambe was. You know, he was missing, a missing person case for over 10 plus years until eventually they found out that he was murdered. And I think stranger danger really needs to be talked about with kids, mates. And you know, this incident sparked a nationwide call just to better educate kids on stranger danger. But what can parents do, mate, to better educate their kids on stranger danger?
I think a lot of it is you could eliminate the stranger danger aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think now pedophiles have gotten to the point where they're nice people. They're good people.
Yeah.
They're people of positions where kids are going to automatically trust them. It's not just like I mean, sure, you're still going to have the instance where somebody just comes up and grabs you and stuff like that. That's always happening. But if we're talking hyper focused on pedophiles, it's teachers, it's doctors, it's coaches. So I think like the stranger danger aspect of like, oh, stranger danger, leave me alone. I think that needs to be adjusted to, you just have to know what's right and what's wrong. And if an adult is asking certain questions, if an adult is saying certain things like, oh, you know, don't tell you, this will be our little secret, or don't tell your parents, or anything like stuff like that. Like, that's where you have to teach your kids, like, you need to tell mom and dad that right away. because that's not right. Or if an adult, like, there's no reason that and this could be sexist, but there's no reason that a male should be asking a female for any sort of help out. And like, if my car is busted, I shouldn't be calling like a nearby female. It's like, hey, can you help me work my car? Like, there's no reason. And there's no reason that an adult should be asking a child for anything. Or even a teenager. Again, my car is broken down. Hey, yo, kids, can you come help me start this? Like, there's no I'm a capable, grown male adult. I should be able to figure this shit out on my own. I shouldn't need to have the help for anybody else. And I think, though, and again, you could view that however you want, but let's talk statistically again on that stuff. But I think that's where kids need to understand, and that's where parents have to educate it in a certain manner of, this is what's right, this is what's not right. If anything in this category happens, then you need to let us know right away, regardless of who the adults are. Like, sure, as a stranger perspective, if you don't know who the adult is, they're a stranger to you, don't give them information. Don't talk to them. Don't do this. And I've done classes here where I've done like mom and daughter classes, and the daughters will be like 10, 11, 12 years old. And I'll just start talking to them like, hey, what's your name? Oh, what school do you go to? And and the moms will just be like, and the kids are just rattling off information. I'm like, oh, what's your teacher's name? Oh, you play soccer? What? Cool. What's your logo? And it's just like, and they're just like, oh, I'm the Bears and I do this. And the moms
that's
are
how
like,
you're fishing them in.
So like I'll be like, all right, parents, when you get home, you know what your homework is, and they're like, yep. And like the kids have no idea, and I'm like, it's so easy. Even with teenagers, I've done it where I'll even start seminars and I'll say, don't give out information, and then I'll casually be like, oh, you're going to Michigan? What school are you going to? Oh, cool. You gonna join a house, or what's your major? What's this? And I'm like, you realize this all the information you just gave me now? And they're like, oh, yeah. Like I'm like, and I'm just being a nice, friendly guy, but I'm like, that's what people are gonna do.
Yeah, you'll have to have a read of the Daniel Morecambe case, David.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up after this.
Because what happened was too, mate, I was in grade 11 when this happened, right? And we heard about it, and it was all over the fucking news for months. And basically, he was waiting at a bus stop, and apparently his bus had actually broken down. And the guy that abducted him approached Daniel and said, oh, you missed your bus, have you? Look, the shops aren't too far. I can drive you to the shops. And unfortunately, he got into the car with this individual, and that's the end of that, mate. And you touched on some interesting things there too. With kids, they obviously are quite naive, and I think parents do, mate. They need to educate them and talk to them about the questions that they need to ask. So what other questions should the parents be sort of asking their kids?
Word. That's why that safe word will come into play. So like one thing you can do is like, we didn't have the safe word growing up, but like my parents would make it clear. It's like, hey, after school today, either I'm going to be there or Mrs. So-and-so is going to be there. Like, that's it. Those are the only two people you were to get in the car with. And so like, if I saw my friend's mom show up, it's like, okay, yep, I'm going home with her today. If she didn't show up, well, I'm waiting for my mom, I guess. Like, because those are the only two people I can go. The other thing is like having a safe word. So if you come up to me and say, hey, oh, your mom said I can take you home today. It's like, oh, well, what's the safe word? I forgot, but come on. It's like, nope, unless you tell me the safe word, I'm not going. And that's just like or something as simple as like, oh yeah, like you missed the bus, I can drive you. It's like, well, I don't know you, what's the safe word? And again, it's could just be as simple like, what is it? Now, you could also do it where if an adult comes to pick up your child and they don't recognize them, it's like, nope, your mom told me the safe word is so-and-so. And like, okay, right, you got the safe word, I can go with you, and that's a safe manner. But I think the safe word aspect is huge in that sense. Obviously, if you're giving it away to somebody else, change it for the next time. But I think that's a good way to immediately just kind of, like, it's a game for the kids. Like, oh, you didn't say the magic word, I can't come in.
Yeah. This might be a good video, some good content for you maybe to get down the track, because obviously your page is amazing, mate. It's fantastic. It's martial arts and self-defense, but I'm sure a lot of parents would really appreciate the information that you would share about that sort of stuff. But there's also a bullying epidemic going on in the world, mate. And I know America obviously has a bullying epidemic. We have a bullying epidemic here in Australia. But what can parents do to help their kids with regards to bullying?
Get them in combat sports.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing, because now it's not even like the bullying. It's luring kids into the bathrooms to beat the shit out of them. It's luring kids. I mean, we've had incidents of like kids that get lured over to like sleepovers, and then they show up at the sleepover and they just get beat up and videotaped.
I saw a video. Did you see that video? I think the Gracies, Henna and Heron Gracie, put up a video ages ago. This individual, I think her name was Naomi. She went to a slumber party, and her so-called friends, she thought they were friends with her. Beat the fuck out of her.
Yeah, so I think that's like it's a different bullying and then obviously like it's just going to get posted online and stuff like that. But it's a different bullying than when we were in grade school. And I just think kids, like, you just got to make your kid, one, obviously physically they can protect themselves, but two, when you know you can physically protect yourself, you're less inclined to worry about any of the other shit, because you're like, I don't care about what you're saying, and if you decide to get physical, I can protect myself. When you're not able to get physical, you're going to take the words a lot more emotionally. So I think just give them a strong mind and a strong like physical capability to protect themselves. That'll solve again. And again, nothing makes me smile more than when a bully picks on the wrong dude and gets their ass whooped, or somebody else comes in and beats the bully's ass. It's like, good, piece of your own medicine, you know? Like,
100%.
I think like sometimes it's you gotta kind of put people in that place a little bit. I think the other thing too is like, to some extent, parents do need to make sure that they are raising their kids to be tough and not take everything so literally. Like, even some of my nieces and nephews, you could say the smallest little thing and they have complete meltdowns, and then others will just stare at you and are not even fazed by what you're saying. It's like, you got to toughen them up to some extent, because you can't just get emotional over every little thing that people say. Because, you know, my instructor was really big on that. He's like, it's just words. He's like, who gives a shit what anyone says? They're just words. And if you want to go cry about it later. But like, when you're out there and they're saying it to you, just just don't give them any reaction. Because that's what they're just trying to pull something out of you. They're not just saying it to say it. They want to get a reaction so that they can escalate it even more, and that's where they get their satisfaction from. It's like, so just
and striking arts are amazing, mate. You know, and any sort of striking art you do is amazing, but it's not advisable for another child to hit another child in the playground, because they both get suspended. Would you recommend children start with BJJ or some sort of grappling art to start with? What would you recommend parents should do to get their children into martial arts?
I tell the kids both are great. I think Jiu Jitsu is a better one to start, because it's a safer way. You're going to get hands-on right away. Boxing, obviously, like as a kid, you're not going to make any contact for a while. I think the grappling you're going to learn, and especially as like little kids, if you get up until you get to like high school or so, where people are like really kind of throwing punches, you're going to get like one or two punches, and then everyone just kind of like ties up and just kind of squeezes and pushes each other around. So I think jiu-jitsu as a whole is better to start with. But both are a necessity. You can't, if you're training for self-defense, you can't just focus on one. But I think as a kid, like, if I want my kid to learn something, it's like, go do jiu-jitsu, because you're going to get hands-on day one.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think of Henna and Heron Gracie's new technique, the safety wrap system? I think it's fucking amazing, but what do you think of the technique?
I think it's just a big name for something that's been around for a while. It's a gift wrap. It's a gift wrap position.
It's a gift wrap.
I'll be honest. I'm not a huge fan of his. He's great at marketing his stuff, and he's great at selling his stuff. But at the end of the day, he's also the one that's teaching people to do arm bars from mounts for self-defense. And we're like, dude, of all people, like, you should know, if you're on top, just stay on top. Get back to your feet, get away, you know. So like, some of the stuff that we see him teaching is strictly just a paycheck for him. And so that's where like a lot of the guys in our community of like the combatives will kind of look at this stuff and be like, this is kind of stupid. And actually Eli and another buddy of mine posted a reel recently kind of making fun of the Simply Wrap system. It was kind of funny, but no, I mean, he's got some great stuff. And I think what he does with the bullied kids and bringing them in and getting them training, I love it. But I think just from like a self-defense perspective, I'm like, you could be doing so much more. You could do so much better with your knowledge than what you are. And I think a lot of it's like he's doing it to like show people and then be like, let's get you in here and pay to do this and this and that. And it's like, but do you need to teach them this? Like, I'm fine with you doing all the marketing employee stuff, but why is it to teach this? Like, stop teaching this and teach something that's going to be like, why am I teaching women to do arm bars or triangle chokes when they should be working on trying to kick and get away and get back? Or why am I trying to teach knee bars for the streets? Like, get the fuck out. Like, I don't want to be dangling around. And again, you're also trying to teach us, like, you got to remember, you're teaching people that have no experience. So trying to teach somebody how to do a knee bar, like, do you know how hard it is for me to do a knee bar to somebody? Against somebody that's like really not wanting to be there. So I think he could spend a lot more time teaching the fundamentals and be fine with that. But teach your own. But I think the system as a whole, it's great in the sense that cops can look at it and be like, yeah, this is why we need to train. But to like slap something on a system that's like it's a gift wrap, and like any jiu-jitsu guys, like, yeah, that's a gift wrap position. It's also the fact that's like, why design a system where you're not always getting, like, most of the cops around me are by themselves. Like, by the time backup comes, they should already have the dude on the ground controlled. So why not teach them a way to do it for one person, and then later on you could show two. So it's kind of like a hit or miss with it. But again, the fact that he's out there and like giving stuff to cops, if anything, it's showing like, if you train, this is what it could look like if you're actively training and doing stuff. So I think that's important to know. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it.
And you've worked with police too, mate.
Yes.
You do a lot of training with police as well. And I'm not too sure how much training police officers get in America, but I talk to I talk to some law enforcement agencies here in Australia, and it's the same thing, mate. And, we know that an officer that's not trained is more likely to utilize their tools, their firearm, their taser, and things like that.
Or just get more violent.
Yeah. So what's some of the training that you've done with police to better equip them with better things for the street?
We teach them just, again, like the simple holds, the simple positions, just learning how to stay on top, learning how to create that pressure, learning how to do safe takedowns. Again, a lot of it's just like, you got to get in there and train. And like it said, I probably train more in a month than most cops do in like 2, 3, 4 years. And I talk to other cops and they're like, no, you have time. Like, there's always time to do it. I think a lot of it is just the money. Like, I charge any first responder dirt cheap to train at the gym, because it's like, I'd rather you get in there and train. And if anyone wants to argue, it's like, well, you're not using this shit on a daily basis. I was like, if I'm like, I need to make something to pay the bills, but I'm like, it's dirt cheap. Come in and train. And then obviously, like, even when I do some of the high level seminars where we have cops training in there and they make a bad mistake, you'll see the instructors be like, what the fuck were you doing? They're like, why aren't you doing this? Like, you're a cop. You can't be doing things in this manner. It's like, now you're not going home to your kids. Like, you're dead. You just got killed in this drill because you didn't know what you're doing. And so I think cops need that reality check sometimes. And I think a bigger part of it, though, is fitness. I don't know about your cops out there, but our cops here aren't the best physically in shape. I'd say at least the vast majority, and I think that's where it starts, is a lot of the cops that are out of shape. It's like, how am I going to depend on you to protect me if I can run circles around you? So I think it starts with the physical fitness of police, and then obviously training has to go in with that. So I think anything where you can kind of, it's bad to say, but I think anything where you can kind of give them a little bit of that reality check of, well, this is what it's going to be like. I think that's kind of the best way to kind of introduce that to them.
And what about medical professionals as well, mate? Do you work with paramedics and things like that?
I have some that train with me, but I don't like specifically go out and work with them, though.
Yeah, because we have a problem over here in Australia. There's a sign on the back of our ambulances. We will not tolerate abuse. I can't remember what it says, but we get a lot of people or paramedics that have been physically assaulted, by the people that are actually there to help the individual, and yet these people are either high on fucking drugs or something. So, I mean, with regards to what you do with law enforcement as well, what else can be done, especially in, just with paramedics? How can they do
I would encourage, I would say the same thing, to train. I think across the board, people just need to train.
Train.
I think the answer is there.
Train.
I think it doesn't matter what your profession is. Everyone always wants, well, how would I deal with this? Go train. Well, go train. Until you get into the room where people of all size, people of all backgrounds, you're going to have a dude that's 100 pounds lighter than you, throw you around like a rag doll. You're like, how the fuck is this little guy moving me like this? It's like, that's why you train, because you're going to learn how to do it. You're going to learn how to use your size. And the more you do that, again, two things happen. You realize you know shit.
Yeah.
And then two, you realize like, wow, if I do this stuff, I can actually feel a lot more confident in situations, because now I know, like, people just don't, it's such a, I've never known what it's like. I can't ever recall what it's like not knowing how to fight, because I've been doing it since I was 5.
Yeah.
So, and same with like swimming. I've been swimming ever since I could remember. So it's just one of those, like, I go in the water and I feel fine. But it's like, I have to imagine that to some people, like, not knowing how to fight is like not knowing how to swim. You just get in there and you're drowning. And to me, I'm just comfortable in it. So I think it's just, you don't want that feeling of like I'm suffocating. And you can tell when people don't, because they just get paranoid, they get uptight, and everything is just like, oh, what am I supposed to do right now? It's like, just hold them. Like, what do you mean? What do you do? Hold them, like, grab their arm right here and hold it. Good. See, now he can't pull his arm away. All right, good. Keep doing what you're doing. Like, it's so simple, but you got to put in the work. You got to actually commit, even if it's a couple days a week or a couple times a month. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I think people are under the impression like, oh, I got to train 4 days a week. It's like, I do, because I'm a psychopath and I love it. But I'm like, other than that, I'm like, if you want to train once a week, train once a week. You want to train twice a month, train twice a month. I'm like, that's still better than not having any experience. And if you if you know that you can only train once or twice, or, you know, a small handful of times, you're going to make sure that those specific days are going to count. So you're going to go in there hyper focused, ready to go, and know like, hey, this is the only day I have this week to train, so I'm going to get everything I can out of this class today.
Yes, yeah.
So
chokeholds are amazing, mate. You know, there's nothing quicker that'll shut off the human brain than a chokehold. But there was an incident on a busy New York City subway, mate. There was an individual that I think put a rear naked choke on an individual that was very erratic. Apparently, he was a homeless guy. And unfortunately, this individual held the chokehold for too long, and this person died, mate. But what are some ways that we can better educate martial artists, or if not people, because now people are watching the UFC, they're watching mixed martial arts, they see these moves being demonstrated, and pretty much a rear naked choke, you can show a 5-year-old how to do one.
Right.
You know,
I think,
yeah.
I think people need to know that, one, a lot of the stuff is easier to do than you realize. Like, some of it looks fancy as hell, but the only thing that's fancy about it is like the setups. But the actual application is very simple. I'm cutting off blood flow, or I'm cutting off airflow. I think in addition to that, people also need to realize like how quickly things can go. Like, I can choke somebody, and like, you know, every gym's gonna have that one or two guys that just never tap out to chokes. Yeah. But I can tell, like, hey, any normal person would be put asleep right now. Like, you're waiting for me to kill you. You know, you're just sick in the head. So, like, I can tell when I'm putting the choke on somebody of, like, all right, this person should be, like, in my head, I'm like, this person should be tapping by now. So either they're asleep or they're just really struggling. And I'll even, like, loosen up, because I know from my experience, I'm like, okay, it's been, like, 10 seconds, and I know, like, everything's there. Everything's where it needs to be. It's tight. It's so, like, you learn how quickly, but people that don't know, that sit there, I'm just gonna squeeze, and they just don't know when to stop. So I think it's that training is going to teach you like how to do it properly, but also how quickly, like, you're talking seconds, less than 10 seconds, you know. But people also from like the outside always think that they're super violent, and I'm like, it's probably the least violent submission you can do to somebody, because you're just putting them to sleep, and they'll wake up like that. If I continue squeezing after the fact,
and
that's where we have an issue. But like, people are like, oh, you should just put them in like an armbar or something. Like, why? Because I like the chance of me breaking something is a lot higher than me doing severe brain damage, because if I feel you all of a sudden just go limp, I'm going to let go and you'll come right to.
That's right. So, and the beauty about chokeholds too, David, because we were talking about street fights, you know, we're talking about situations where, you know, what if the individual's high on meth or some sort of drugs? You know, if you put them in,
that's what I tell people.
Yeah,
like, chokeholds, like, your brain will shut off. Doesn't matter what you're on, your brain will shut off.
If you try to put a kimura on someone or an armbar and they're high on drugs, you know,
they're not going to feel it.
They're not going to feel it, man. They're not going to feel it. This is the thing with chokeholds; they need to be taught correctly.
Yeah.
What do you think with regards to that?
I think, and I've posted some videos on this where it's like I encourage people like know how to do chokes. One, you can hit a choke from just about any position you're in.
Yeah.
Which is the beauty of it. As long as their head and neck is there, you can hit a choke.
Yeah.
But like the same thing, it's like if they're high, like you see fights of guys whose arms get mutilated and they don't even react to it, or they'll literally like pop it back into place and keep going because they don't feel it. But your choke is like, I'm not impacting your pain tolerance, I'm impacting your body's natural just state. And if your body all of a sudden loses blood flow because I'm cutting it off, your body's like, oh, well, guess we're going to sleep. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're waking up. You know, like you don't get to tough out of a choke. It's I'm gonna tough out as long as I can, but your body's gonna shut down. Mm-hmm. You break in, it's like if I don't feel it, it's like, yeah, keep pulling. I don't feel that. You know, that I can't attest to what everyone's pain tolerance is for stuff. So I would much rather say chokes are gonna be more critical than anything else. So
have you been choked out before? I'm sure you have, mate, within your jiu-jitsu journey. Have you been choked out?
I've never fully unconscious, but definitely to the point where things started going
stars.
I'm seeing stars and things are going black and blood vessels are popping and stuff, and you're kind of like, I'm gonna hold out as long as I can, and then it's like you're kind of just like in like a daze for a minute, and then either they stop it or whatever, and all of a sudden, like, everything just comes back up. You're like, oh, I guess I was starting to take a little snooze there or whatever. But, like, it's also important to kind of know where that level is so you know, like, all of a sudden it could just go, like you could feel fine, and then all of a sudden you're like, why am I seeing stars all of a sudden? And then everything just gets very slow motion.
It's weird, mate, because you're right. It's a blood choke. We're talking about strangulations. We're cutting off the blood to the brain. But you can still breathe. You're fine. You can still breathe.
The breathing ones are the ones that bother me more.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden I can't breathe, and then it feels like your windpipe's about to snap. And that's like, I'll tap off that because it's like I feel like my throat's about to snap off.
Yeah.
But the blood chokes are scary because you just don't know. Like, you may not even... Like, I've had guys that will, like, put their arms up to tap, and then all of a sudden there's like this, and then they'll come to and like, did I tap? And they're like, no. Like, you went out. I swore I tapped. I've choked people out before. You'll see their hands come out, and then all of a sudden I'll just see like they'll... And then it'll just come back down like, oh, you're asleep. Yeah. And like, you just don't realize like it just goes 0 to 100, and then you're like, oh.
It's a weird experience, man. I remember when I've been choked out a couple of times, and I got put in a baseball bat choke, and it was a weird experience. I remember I was passing his guard. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm getting to side control. I'm working my way to knee on belly. Next thing I know, I'm waking up and my legs are in the air. And I'm like, what the fuck happened? He said, dude, you blacked out. But it's a very effective technique. And
I agree.
Yeah, very effective. Dave, mate, I've got to thank you. I know how fucking busy you are.
I appreciate it, man.
I'll wrap it up now, mate. But where can people find you, Dave? You're on all the socials?
Yeah, David Heineman on pretty much everything, or Stay Safe Martial Arts. You type in one of those two, shit will pop up. But yeah, all social media. YouTube, we got longer form videos. Obviously, Instagram, we keep everything quick and short. So if you're liking what you see on Instagram, go to YouTube. We do more in depth, but I also do kind of more sport based stuff on there as well. So you'll get the self-defense, you'll get product reviews, you'll get jiu-jitsu techniques, striking techniques. So we'll do a little bit more in depth stuff on the YouTube channel. But no, man, I truly appreciate you having me on here and chatting with you. It was a good talk.
It's been fantastic, mate. I've really enjoyed sitting down and having a chat with you. I mean, I could talk to you for another 3 hours, mate. I find you a very interesting person to talk to.
I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate it.
But I really appreciate you sitting down and having a chat, mate. But I will chat to you soon anyways.
All right, brother.
Thanks very much, Dave.
Thank you.